Welcome to this week's Modern Metagame, where we analyze the tournaments that happened over the weekend and take a look at what the meta is shaping out to be. This week we had SCG Indianapolis 5K, and then we had the Saturday and Sunday challenges to take a look at. So let's see what the data kind of shows. For SCG Indianapolis, we see that Living End dominated the top 32, taking 3 of the top 8 slots. And then after Living End, you had a good amount of blue-white control, only one of which was in the top 8. And then you had Burn, Shadow, Murktide, Rhinos, and then just a bunch of different one-ofs, making it interesting. So to note here, it looks like people just didn't bring Grave Hate, and the Living End just kind of ran away with it. The top 8 here consisted of Living End, blue-white control, Golgari Yawgmoth, Living End, Is It Breach, which is the Grinding Station Underworld Breach combo, and then a mono blue affinity list and a blue-red Murktide list. Interesting, and Living End ended up taking the entire tournament, so take that how you will. For Saturday's Modern Challenge, we have blue-red X Murktide taking up 16%. You notice that it's no longer just blue-red because there are occasional teamer lists popping up now running Tarmogoyf. It's kind of non-bow with Murktide removing cards from your graveyard, but at the same time your opponent's going to be fueling theirs, so it's a pretty strong powerhouse to be splashing into that green, and also gives you access to cards like Veil of Summer in the sideboard. And then you've got 4-color Blink taking up a good chunk, and then more blue-white control, some splashing green, some splashing red, so you have the additional X. And then Amulet Titan, 4-color elementals, Rhinos, and Dredge. Again, this is kind of what I would expect the MTGO metagame to look like. You have your blue-red Murktide, and then your Blinks and elementals still dominating the format. Control finally starting to show up here, and Amulet Titan always the house that it is for the people who know how to play it. The top 8 was 4-color elementals, Teamer, Rhinos, blue-white control, Bant control, Amulet Titan, Murktide, a blue-white Saga Blade list, which falls into the other category here, and then also a mono-white Hammer list. Good to see mono-white Hammer and then a Saga Blade list. Makes it very interesting, very diverse for our modern metagame here. And good to see that we're not just dominating by one deck. All right, and for Sunday's challenge, we have Rhinos destroying this challenge at a whopping 13%, and Murktide tying that again with that blue-red X, most being blue-red, and the occasional teamer. And then you also have you have Hammer showing back up in the percentages here. We had Hammer in the Saturday's challenge, but it was a 1, and this time we have multiple. Then you have, again, more control, more Living End, more Dredge, Shadow, Tron showing up here, and then Wish Shift. I found this interesting. I had no idea what it was and had to look it up. It is Titan Shift, but does not actually run Scape Shift in the main board. What it runs instead is the card Wish to then go get your Scape Shift, because you need 7 anyway to be able to use Scape Shift and insta-win. So that's not a terrible game plan, and that way you're not just stuck with a dead card in your deck. And then, of course, the others making up a good chunk. So for the top 8, you have blue-white control, Teamer Rhinos, blue-red Murktide, Jund Yawgmoth. It's really black-red Yawgmoth that's splashing red strictly for Mages of the Moon, which isn't a terrible idea right now. Lots of multicolored decks running in the format, so being able to put those out of the way is a pretty good stop. Then you have Living End, Dredge, Amulet Titan, and Jund Wish Shift was your top 8. So you had 2 very interesting decks in the top 8, and then your standard stuff, and blue-white control ended up taking the entire tournament. So when you combine all these results, what do you get? You see that you're mainly looking at blue-red X Murktide, followed by blue-white control, followed by Rhinos, followed by Living End, and then you have your Titan, Shadow, Dredge, Hammer, Tron, and then just everything else. So all in all, you're looking at a relatively diverse metagame. If you're looking for what to stop, what you need in your sideboard, I'd be focused on ways to stop Rhinos and Living End, so those nice 0 mana spells that they're casting, such as good way to stop that's Void Mirror, Chalice on 0. They have ways to deal with it, of course, but, you know, you gotta play it to your outs, right? Then I'd be looking at some way to stop mana stuff because you've got Hammer, Titan, and Tron. All of those are either big mana stuff or Saga type lists. Finding a way to shut off those, such as Blood Moon or Alpine Moon, pretty decent. Then you have the Blue-Red X Murktide, which I don't really know if there's any straight counters other than just removal spells and Grave Hate, so that way they can't delve their Murktides out. And Grixis Shadow kind of falls into that same category because they've got the Death Shadow that you need to remove. And then they're also typically running Murktide now, so you need to be focused on the graveyard a bit. And being focused on the graveyard's not a bad plan when that's what Dredge and Living End are trying to do, so you're doubling up on those as well. So, how does last week's meta compare to this week's meta? Well, you can see that Blink has fallen out of favor relatively rapidly in the last week. That being said, Murktide is still ever so present. It went from 10% of the meta on the 14th to 12% of the meta on the 21st. And so you have Control showing up out of the blue in this week's meta versus last week's meta. I would say out of the blue. At the same time, it's not shocking. Control's always strong. It's just, does it hit the right matchups and whatnot? Again, 4-color elementals just about disappearing. It exists, but it's part of the 40% of the other category in this meta. It didn't get its own slot for this week versus last week. Tron is present in both. It took a bit of a hit in this week's meta, going down, but c'est la. Amulet Titan is sitting at about the same. Living End saw an uptick. Rhinos saw an uptick as well. Hammer stayed about the same. Yawgmoth dropped off the map from the 14th meta to the 21st, but that's more because it just didn't have much top results. It was still there. It just didn't get enough to get its own slot. So that being said, there's always plenty to look forward to, and it's always interesting to see the differences between how the modern metagame shifts from week to week. I feel this is a great little comparison to do a showing. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.